Hey, Metal Dave with you, along with my co-host Jason McMaster. Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Today we're going to nerd out on the Big Four of thrash, that being, of course, Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax, and Megadeth. We're going to share some stories, share some thoughts, give some opinions, just chew the fat a little bit on the Big Four. But before we do that, Jason, what's going on with you? What you got? What you listening to? What you reading?
I,
What you watching?
I am alive. I am doing fine. Feeling good about everything. And thank you for asking. Um, I have, I'm not, I wouldn't say addicted to documentaries or rock documentaries, but every once in a while, I will scroll past something and say out loud, man, I need to watch that. I'm going to learn something if I watch that. Um, I There's an AC/DC one. You know, we just talked about AC/DC Power Up in our last episode, the one just prior to this, and everyone should go check that out. By the way, but there's an AC/DC one that I can't really tell if it's official or not. It just looks the ad on it looks kind of janky, so I
Yeah.
need to just investigate that one. But I pressed play and was mesmerized. Documentary about Gordon Lightfoot,
Oh, wow. Nice.
and it's a pretty incredible story. I don't think I ever knew he was from Canada,
Yeah.
and he is ultimately revered as Canada's, you know, biggest songwriter
Yeah.
by anyone and everyone from globally. Of course, being uh, idolized by, and in the film, I don't recall the title of the film, but I think it's one of his song titles, which was "If You Could Read My Mind." That's right.
Oh,
If
okay.
you could read my mind, love. That one.
Yeah.
That's the title of the movie. Okay, so otherwise, no, you know, his a couple of his other hits were "Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald," and of course "Sundown." And he wrote songs for everyone. Uh,
Yeah.
Barbara Streisand sang his songs. The Dandy Warhols covered his music. Um, and it's incredible. They have Randy Bachman and members of the Guess Who and BTO. They have Rush. They have Alex and Getty. Like Getty goes on for like 10 minutes talking about how he's the proud son and that he is this really big deal, and that his the way his guitar and his words were huge impact on everyone who played music, from even if you played hard rock all the way down to, of course, singer songwriter. But he wrote with everyone. There's all anyway. It really was a wonderful experience, and I learned a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and just how he wrote songs, and he studied that shit.
Yeah.
He meant every word, which is kind of what Getty was talking about. And his lyrics always made sense and were extremely personal. And it was never just like, all right, rock and roll, just, bullshit to party to,
Right.
it he was serious, and a serious songwriter, should be revered by his peers, and he was. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's just unbelievable how many people covered his songs,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize. And I swear there's songs out there that you've heard, pop stars do, Gordon Lightfoot songs, and
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you just didn't know it. So
Yeah.
that was something that I really, really, really dug into a few nights ago.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that because I'm a total rock doc junkie. Anything to do with music. I don't, I don't care if it's a country western star or a Broadway singer or whatever. I'm fascinated by just the tale of, how these people came to prominence and how how they do their craft and write songs and, just their inspiration and how they rose to fame. I find that stuff fascinating, and regardless of the genre. So,
The
yeah, I'll have to look
cool
for
thing
that one and
is
add it
that
to my list.
yeah, the cool thing, the really cool thing is this doc was made while he was alive, so he's starring in his own documentary.
Oh,
He's a
cool.
living legend, like the Lemmy movie. It's like I'm glad that he was the star of his own Hollywood movie.
Yeah,
So the fact
yeah,
that he's still alive, I mean, he's really old, but he still plays sometimes, and he's still around and still has his fan base is you don't even know you like Gordon Lightfoot until you find out it's Gordon Lightfoot
right,
because
right.
of what I said a minute ago.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah.
but yeah, I think that he's still alive, and a lot of information.
Wow. I'll have to look for that one. I'm a total nerd for that kind of stuff. So, Gordon Lightfoot, I'll add him to my list.
What about you? What are you doing?
Um, well, for those who are listening who may not know, I have a 12-year-old son, and he's into collecting vinyl right now. And of course, we're in this age of pandemic, so you kind of have to make appointments at record stores, and you have to wear a mask, and they only let a handful of people in at a time or whatever. But my son and we went to a record store here in Austin, and we kind of branched off into opposite corners of the store. And he comes back to me and tapping me on the shoulder, and he goes, "Dad, look what I found!" And it's a vinyl copy of Blue Oyster Cult's "Fire of Unknown Origin" record. And I was like, "Oh, cool!" And it was 99 cents. So I
Score.
was like, oh man, the single on that record is "Burning for You," and of course I
Love
was
that song.
familiar. Yeah, it's a great song. It was one of the early videos on MTV. So I'm thinking that song alone is worth 99 cents, right?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
that's what the song would cost if you downloaded it. Because
yeah, yeah,
buy a song at a time now in this messed up world we live in. When we grew up, it was you buy the whole record or you go home.
right,
You can't
right.
break a piece off of the album and take it home.
Yeah,
That's what's going
right.
on now. I call bullshit.
Well, well, so the whole album was 99 cents. It's on
Perfect.
vinyl. I was looking at the song tracks, the title, the track listing, and realizing, wow, what a great record this is. It's got, besides "Burning for You," the title track is on there. "Veteran of the Psychic Wars" is on there. Joan Crawford is on there. Um, it's a really solid record. So we brought it home and we were listening to it, and I realized while I'm listening to it, that band Ghost took everything they know from that album. If you,
I can see that.
yeah,
See that.
it's like if you listen to this album, "Fire of Unknown Origin," you can totally see where Ghost got everything. And it's just one of those records that it's a great listen from start to finish. It's not a concept album as far as I'm aware, but it definitely kind of has a continuation that seems to flow naturally across one side and then over to the other. It's a full listening experience. It's not necessarily divided into songs, if you know what I'm saying. It's like,
Not a concept record or leaning
yeah,
that.
it's not a concept record as far as I know, but it just musically it just kind of flows. And that's not to say that the songs all sound the same. They do have their own identity, but somehow the listening experience is very cohesive. It's just a great album in that regard. And I was flipping it over, being the nerd that I am. And do you know who produced that record?
Martin Birch.
Martin Birch, that's correct. And I never knew. Of course, I know Martin from his work with Iron Maiden, and I think he did some Deep Purple and some Rainbow, and he did Black Sabbath's "Heaven and Hell" and "Mob Rules." But I never affiliated him with Blue Oyster Cult.
What year?
Um, it was 1981 is when the record came out. So I was doing my homework, and my favorite album of all time is Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, and I know that came out in 1982. So I guess he was obviously working on this Blue Oyster Cult record just before he went into the studio with Iron Maiden to cut Number of the Beast. But anyway, 99 Cents, Blue Oyster Cult, Fire of Unknown Origin, a great album that I missed somehow along on the first go around in 1981, but I'm
Well,
finally catching up to it, and
for
it's awesome.
awesome. So the 99 cents that Ghost did not spend on that record has paid off big for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they've done well by getting some great ideas from that record. I
Yeah,
mean, the title alone is very metal.
yeah,
Fire of Unknown Origin should have been on Heaven and Hell, you know.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly, right? Yeah, it's a great title. Great album. The artwork is awesome. But yeah, for 99 cents, you can't beat it. And I'm glad to have it as part of my collection. I've been listening to it pretty often ever since I acquired it, because I can't believe I missed it the first go around. But today we are talking about the Big Four. This is a subject that I know Jason is going to have.
I am excited about this.
Yes, this is right in your wheelhouse. So of course we're talking Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax. Where do we start? What do you want to talk about with the Big Four?
I guess, you know, when you think of the Big Four, you know, and you just say it at the coffee table or in the lunchroom or whatever, and maybe someone our age or even a little older would think, oh yeah, you mean the Beatles? No, that's the Fab Four, dummy. The Big
Yeah,
Four, I don't know who coined the phrase the Big Four, but once you find out what it is, you realize, oh, okay. And it could have been Lars, you know,
who
could have been
knows?
James, could have been right. But I'm thinking it might have come from either their camp or Live Nation or someone they knew industry wise that was trying to sort of like uh, herd those cats, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, it's a brilliant sort of historical moment in music, much less heavy metal and whatever subgenre you choose to use. I prefer the term speed metal or thrash because all four of those bands are masters of that. And then some people might just call it good old 80s metal, but that turns it into an umbrella, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so not to get too historical, it's going to sound all over the place like I'm a confused madman and
You're
heavy metal
not?
heavy right heavy metal junkie. I'm not that either.
Yeah, right. Since when?
There are things that I would like to talk about first. Now, when you go back to any kind of Genesis, the first band is Metallica for me, just for where I was standing in the U.S. I remember reading a Kerrang magazine, and it had photos of these kids in LA who were who were sort of in the up and coming demo section in the back of a Kerrang magazine, which is an English magazine.
Yeah.
And so these kids from LA who are in this, my favorite English rock and roll magazine, Kerrang magazine, and I'm reading about the word Metallica for the first time. And someone from Kerrang, either they were a U.S. contributor to the English magazine that did the article, or someone from England flew over there and did a piece on them because it was color photos. It wasn't just like, hey, there's this demo from these kids in L.A. and da da da. I'll try to fast forward. So that was the first time. But I mean, Lars was wearing silver spandex with no shirt and had like a page boy haircut, very, very short hair. I don't know if he could even grow a mustache yet. I mean, they were young, you
Yeah.
know, they were 18 years old or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
17, if maybe, right? And they were had done a handful of shows. I'm holding my hand up, right? It could be 3 or 4 shows at that point. And I want to say they might have even still been a 5-piece band.
Oh, wow.
It's Lloyd Grant on guitar, Dave Mustaine on guitar, Ron McGovney on bass, and then, Lars and James. Would James just be the singer at that point? Okay, let's fast forward. So, everybody knows Kill 'Em All comes out, but meanwhile, everybody in San Francisco at that time had seen Metallica play prior to the release of that, of course, in a very short time between, 81, which I think is James and Lars met. Demo trading, tape trading created this whole thing. And there, of course, the same thing that was happening in Los Angeles and it's happening in San Francisco and New York and even in Texas and Detroit and whatever. There's all these underground hard rock and heavy metal scenes.
Yeah.
You had Anthrax in New York. You had Metallica, LA via San Francisco. You had, and Exodus and Testament and, had the Bay Area is this mecca for what it is that we're really talking about.
Yeah.
So you have this mecca of, heavy music happening in San Francisco. I mentioned all the tape trading. These people are writing each other and calling each other. I'm talking Anthrax. Everybody knows the story. Dave Mustaine was let go from Metallica. Kirk Hammett from Exodus flies to the East Coast. They make the record. They go on tour. The same thing is happening with Anthrax. And these bands are getting what I call garage label deals.
Yeah.
Small record garage, a guy who owns a record store creates a label, that kind of a thing is going on, all from the budding tape trading thing. So Dave Mustaine leaves, forms Megadeth immediately after he leaves Metallica. So there's Megadeth and Metallica already gunning for each other's asses and breakneck, attitude and FU attitude. And Anthrax is just trying to write the fastest song they can without it not sounding like, too much like Judas Priest or something.
Yeah.
Respectively, of course.
Right.
Because they wrote like good sort of boogie hard rock, but heavier and, gasolined up muscle rock, but they were going, it was just, it was on fire. Fistful of Metal, Kill 'Em All, Killing is My Business and Business is Good, and Slayer, Show No Mercy.
Yeah.
Things are happening sort of at the same time, and there's some simpatico going on. Little did the rest of the world, it took a long time for people to catch on. 85, 86, 87 by that time, which is a really short time from you talking 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. It's not even a decade. And these bands are already touring together, creating this music that's completely breaking down any wall built that says you can't do that on a guitar. You can't do that on drums. You can't do that on a bass, a la Cliff Burton, Frankie Bello, Dan Lilker, who was a member of Anthrax. He's the original Anthrax bassist.
Yeah.
Dave Mustaine, I feel like, taught everyone how to play like that.
Yeah.
Being that Slayer is from Los Angeles, they were a bit niche with, their lyrics were even more violent than the normal, Kill 'Em All, which is basically about headbanging and thrashing. Right. And some of Anthrax had some of that as well, and they had a cover song. Alice Cooper's 18 is on that, which sort of like set them up to be something else on top of a speed metal band, a thrash metal band. In my opinion, obviously they were into Kiss and Alice Cooper, and they wanted to write good melodic songs just as much as they wanted to burn the house down, right?
Yeah.
Slayer is its own thing. Megadeth did not sound like Metallica, but there was this obvious vein between them, like a Siamese twin sort of a thing. But then you think about the Bay Area and the California, the Slayer, they were trying to out fast each other, sort of.
Yeah.
Then you had so you had all this California stuff, and then you had Anthrax, which is kind of the odd bird. Their style was only slightly different than anybody else's over on the West Coast. But because they were there from that sort of genesis, to use my own word, they're included in the Big Four. Now, this is going to come up again and again as to maybe why Testament and Exodus and Overkill, which is another East Coast, of course, Exodus and Testament being Bay Area.
Right.
And there's so many sort of under the surface bands that I could talk about. One being Dark Angel. They were like the other speed metal band that was similar to Slayer that coulda, shoulda, woulda been part of the Big Nine or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
But that goes, and that's arguable, friendly argument, right?
Yeah.
That could have turned into something. Let's go back to the top. The idea of the Big Four came about for a show in Bulgaria?
Poland.
Yeah.
I think they did the first one in Poland.
Yeah. And maybe there were rumors of there being an entire tour of that. But I remember there was actually a small amount of shows that had the other three, but without Metallica for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any politics or anything behind that. Probably. I don't really care. I don't really care. Well, unfortunately that lives among us.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? And, sort of where I was there. I had Show No Mercy and Kill 'Em All. And when the records were brand new, I had those I had Fistful of Metal. I had, Killing Is My Business. Where were you in 83?
Well, it's kind of something you touched on earlier. So my sort of evolution through as a rock fan, started with Kiss, and then I got a little heavier with AC/DC and Van Halen, and then I graduated to like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. And I didn't see how it was possible to get any heavier than like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest, right? And then I heard the Big Four bands, and it was just leaps and bounds away from something that I didn't think could be surpassed, and it was just crazy that there was this scene that was creating this type of music that sort of capitalized on everything that came before and just revved it up to this insane speed. And then, added the lyrics were kind of violent, and it was just heavy beyond heavy. And I remember one of the things in preparing for the show, even though we don't prepare much, I was going to ask you, why do you think that the Big Four is so uniquely American? And I have a theory about this. And, the building blocks of the thrash metal, the Big Four thrash metal sound are, of course, the new wave of British heavy metal and hardcore, right? They married those two styles to come up with what we know as thrash metal or the Big Four sound or whatever you want to call it. And I was thinking to myself, why isn't there a British band or a European band that was in the Big Four? And I thought, well, maybe they obviously had the native new wave of British heavy metal bands as influences, right? And I thought, well, maybe they just didn't have the hardcore scene. But if you look back, Britain had bands like GBH and Discharge and Anti-Nowhere League and The Exploited. So they had a hardcore scene. I'm curious to know why the Big Four is so uniquely American when the ingredients were available to everyone.
No, I know that there are, European and British heavy bands and hardcore bands and thrash bands,
Sure. Yeah.
why their scene didn't really spawn something as I don't know. I don't think that they put it all into a box and sold it on, sold it the way that someone has sold the Big Four. But when you think about thrash, in Europe at least, I think about what was happening for as early as like pre Metallica, with just prior 6 months to maybe a year or two before, with the new wave of British heavy metal, but on top of it, the German thrash like Sodom and Destruction and bands like that,
Right.
and Creator, which are this extremely violent hardcore music, but leaning into more of a metal thing with long hair and leather jackets and bullet belts, which is exactly sort of the costume, if you will, the battle gear that fits, right, the uniform that fits with what it is that we're talking about. It's important to me that Europe and the British Isles, and which is where it all began with the Zeppelin, Sabbath, into Priest, and Maiden, and all of these bands influenced everybody else over there the way that the Big Four influenced everybody else over here. But it was Europe and England that influenced Americans to play that fast, no matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think it went back and forth. It was like a game of tennis. It's like they hit the ball, and it was like Motorhead and Diamond Head and Angel Witch and all those new wave of British heavy metal bands that played fast from time to time, super melodic. Like if Lemmy could sing like Paul McCartney, he would have, but he couldn't. He did his best.
He couldn't.
Well, of course, because he inadvertently created heavy metal.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't really, Motorhead's not, to me, a heavy metal band. They are a heavy metal attitude, and convenient to fit the label of heavy metal because of their own shortcomings, if you will, because Lemmy's a dirty pirate, and he sounds like a dirty pirate. So of course they're heavy metal, but it's blues on 10.
Yeah.
Diamond Head, same thing, bluesy, melodic, fun to listen to, very interesting, but almost like a radio friendly heavy metal more than just a speed metal thing, like what it's turning into by the time James and Lars do their thing to it.
Yeah.
And I think that Dave Mustaine is a champion in this conversation. Let's not leave out. I'm not going to leave out Dave Mustaine, because he was into all of this stuff at the same times that Lars is showing up in America from Denmark going, hey, check this out, playing DJ on a Saturday night while they drink beer when they're 16 and 17 years old, after answering ads in the newspaper to form a rock band.
Yeah.
So they're not setting out to be the fastest band in the world. They're just kids worshiping heavy metal, which sounds like you and me or anybody else. And and it just happened to be that was their passion, and they made it their life. But
I think the Big Four, the tag, I almost want to say it could have been created by a journalist, and it's almost become, it's almost like a marketing thing, right? But at the same time, if you look at the album sales of those four bands, they're far and away ahead of anybody else. So they rightfully are the Big Four, right? I mean, there's justification for the term. They're globally recognized. They've sold tons of records. So there is some validation to the term the Big Four from a measure of success type standpoint, And
there's no doubt. There's no doubt. All four of those bands have have been mentioned, if not on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, which is arguably, I mean, I don't read Rolling Stone magazine because it smells like perfume. So it's not very heavy metal to me. I mean, not that I want to buy a magazine that smells like, a shitty rock bar, like stale beer or something. But my point is, it's glossier than the rest, and you can use in every sense of the word glossy.
Yeah.
And I don't really like when I'm talking about the Big Four, I don't really prefer the glossy of any of those bands. I prefer when they just entered, like Rain and Blood is the peak, Among the Living is the peak. Master of Puppets, arguably, you can go either way with Metallica, because you could go to a little further into their polishedness, and then learning experience, just because everybody in all of these bands has grown up quite a bit. They're not 18 years old trying to, outfast each other.
Right.
So that's an important thing to bring up too.
So which of the Big Four is your favorite? If you had to pick
I always have to go with Metallica. I can't not go with Metallica.
Yeah.
And it's probably a tie all the way around with Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer, even though Slayer would, if I had to pick a second, it might be Slayer. But I can't do that to Anthrax or Megadeth, because there's moments I've already confessed. It's probably Peace Sells and Killing Is My Business. Those were the Megadeth records that I just can't not have in my collection.
Yeah.
Or my Deserted Island package.
Yeah.
And I've got to have Among the Living in there. I just have to have it in there.
Yeah.
But I could argue that there's spotted moments throughout all four of these guys' songwriting careers that I'm going, I really love this moment.
Yeah.
I can say I love the entire record. I'm getting I don't mean to pinpoint of that moment, because I'd rather take a whole record than break a piece off and take it home, like you've heard me mention before.
Right. I'm kind of a Metallica guy myself. I just find that, first of all, I feel like I've dedicated more time to them. They probably came on my radar first.
Yeah, that's what it is for me too.
And I've just invested more time in them because they were so groundbreaking, yet accessible. Like, I remember the first time I heard Slayer was the Hell Awaits record. And I remember listening to it in my buddy's car. You probably know this guy, Scott Stein from Valkyrie.
Yes, I do.
I was in his car. He was playing me Slayer, and I was like, oh my God, I can't even listen to this. What is this? It was just noise,
Interesting. Just real quick, I've heard something very similar as this could be a total bullshit rumor that Daryl Abbott, some people call him Dimebag.
Yeah.
That Dime heard Kill 'Em All and said the same thing. What is this? And then ultimately figured out, like, oh damn, this stuff is awesome. But
yeah.
First reaction was not, I can't do it. This is too
right.
crazy. Give me more Van Halen and Kiss and Black Sabbath.
Yeah. And I think that's what leads me back to Metallica. Like, I could appreciate them immediately, and Slayer had to grow on me because they were just so extreme, compared to anything else I heard. So I probably, if I had to, I'm kind of like you, I would pick Metallica at the top, and then the rest kind of becomes a rotating, depends on what day you ask me. I find the other three to be on equal footing. And it just depends on what mood I'm in and what day you ask, as far as if I had to list 2, 3, and 4. But I remember, so you were talking about Metallica going to New York to record the debut. And I remember reading Scott Ian's book. I think it's called I'm the Man.
Yeah, I wish I had that. I need to read that.
It's a good read. And there was a thing that stood out to me. If I'd only took away one thing from that book, he was talking about how Metallica made the trip across the country to sleep in a cold warehouse when they were recording the Kill 'Em All record. And, all these years later, it's so hard to remember that Metallica was once a struggling band because they're just this huge juggernaut now. And they're all millionaires. And you tend to forget that at one time they were driving around the country in a station wagon, bumming meals and places to sleep.
I've never let that ingredient go away. I saw them on the Kill 'Em All tour, of course, and they were in a Winnebago, like literally all could have been like 7 or 8 kids in someone's borrowed Winnebago pulling a trailer.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was a piece of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Slayer saw them. I opened for Slayer on the first tour at the Ritz in Austin. I have the date, November 29th of 1984. Hell Awaits wasn't even out yet. So they had Show No Mercy and the Haunting the Chapel EP.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was $6 to get in. And anyway, they pulled up in the alley behind the Ritz here in Austin in a yellow Camaro pulling a U-Haul. Or no, I'm sorry, it was a gear truck. They weren't pulling a trailer. I think it was a U-Haul truck.
Yeah.
And the band was riding in a yellow Camaro that I believe belonged to Tom Araya.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like you hear those stories, and I always appreciated that because as you know, every band starts like that, but you have a tendency with Metallica because their success is so gigantic that you forget about those things. And then when people rag on Metallica for whatever reason, I just have to remind them or think back to myself, these guys earned it, dude. If you're willing to get in a car and drive across the country and sleep in a warehouse, then you've earned your St. Anger snare. You've earned Load and Reload. You've earned your album with Lou Reed. You can do whatever you want.
That's right. It's Beatles style.
You toughed it out, man.
No one's dogging anyone who is a member or is a living member of the Beatles for making a bad record. No one dogs out the Beatles. I'm not saying that the Metallica are the Beatles. They were the Beatles. I'm not. And when you're talking about what it is you're talking about slags, about whatever, because, they sold out. Well, what do you do? As soon as you make a record and sell it,
you're sold out.
You're selling your music.
Yeah.
If you love what you do so much that you want it to be the way that you put food in your mouth.
Yeah.
You sold out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole other show about.
Yeah. But I just thought that was that's an interesting point, and it's one that's easily lost when you consider the magnitude of Metallica's success. But and by the way,
you could say that about any of those bands.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very true. And if you get a chance to read Scott Ian's book, I remember I borrowed it from somebody, but it was a great read. So
I feel like what that book is saying, and what you took from is that puts it in a perspective for you.
Yeah.
Like what you took away from what's in Scott's words, that puts it in perspective, where Mustaine is having to think about that while he's on a Greyhound. What? Dave Mustaine on a Greyhound? Yes. After being booted, after waking up from Lars's foot, kicking him in the ribs and throwing a Greyhound bus ticket on his chest. Hey, wake up, your bus leaves in an hour.
Yeah.
That's like kids messing with each other is all that is. But that's brutal when you think about it career-wise, Scott Ian, full circle here. Scott Ian's talking about the cold warehouse floor that Dave Mustaine woke up on to a bus ticket.
Yeah. And then what does he do? He goes and starts his own band and becomes his band is one of the Big Four. That's crazy. It's like if revenge is any kind of motivator, Mustaine bottled it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I remember as close as I ever got to seeing a Big Four gig was the Clash of the Titans tour. You remember that?
I do. I missed the tour completely. I was busy myself. I was making records myself
Yeah.
on the
I,
road
s-
or something. Yeah.
I saw it at Sunken Gardens in San Antonio, and it was, it was a dream bill, of course, minus Metallica. So it was Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, and an unknown Alice in Chains was the opening act. And I remember thinking Alice was like completely out of their element, but they soldiered on. They didn't let the hecklers get to them. They put on a good show.
Look what happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he, obviously went on to huge success. But I remember that bill and that tour as it went around the country. I think they were changing headliners every night. So in one market, Slayer would headline. The next night in another city, Anthrax would headline or whatever. And I think in San Antonio, Anthrax was the headliner, and Slayer was the first of the three bands to come on. And later, after the gig, I was actually working that show. I was like an usher or a security guy. My job was basically to keep drunk people away from crashing into the soundboard, right? So I've got this perfect
Wow.
vantage point. It's a
Right.
great.
What year was that?
Oh
80,
man.
88, 89?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah,
Maybe 90.
late,
Early 90?
somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but somewhere in that time frame. And so after the gig, I had access to the back area where the buses were parked and whatnot. And so in between performances, I had to go to the back and take care of some other business. My job was to sort of run back and forth between the soundboard and the backstage area. And when I was back there, I bumped into Tom Araya, and I had a scrap of paper and a pen, and I had him sign it for me. And I told him, I said, dude, you guys should have been headlining today. And he goes, shh. And I thought that was funny because he kind
Well,
of knew they
probably,
should have too.
especially in San Antonio.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in San
Yeah.
Antonio.
So San Antonio owns stock in Slayer.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't know if it goes the other way around because a lot of bands claim
Yeah,
San Antonio, but I think that it should be San Antonio claims because, San Antonio can make or break you a little bit.
sure. If you're a metal band
Yeah.
or a hard rock band, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember seeing Metallica at the Cameo Theater in San Antonio on the Ride the Lightning tour. Talk about make or break a band. They were booked. I remember hearing the ad on the radio. I remember when the gig was announced, and they said, "Coming live to the Cameo Theater, Metallica," and this is the Ride the Lightning tour in San Antonio,
I
right?
was there. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who's the genius that booked this show? Because they're already huge in San Antonio. And I'm thinking Cameo is too small for Metallica at that point in San Antonio. That would have worked elsewhere, right?
Sure
But
looks good on paper. 3 sold out nights.
yeah, so they ended up doing 3 nights, right? And I guess their touring schedule allowed for that because they obviously, or else they started pushing other gigs, to the back burner or something. But they
Right.
ended up staying for 3 nights, and of course, that's a piece of San Antonio metal history. And I was there on the second night. But that was just, you knew you were witnessing the rise of something really big. And I knew it from the get-go when they announced that the show was at the Cameo Theater. I was like, there's no way. They're already too big for that place. And sure enough, they ended up doing 3 nights. And if you were there in San Antonio, that's kind of a bragging right to say you were at
Oh
the
yeah.
3 night stand at
I
the
was
Cameo Theater.
I was there for two out of 3.
Okay.
I was already a massive Armored Saint fan, and their first debut record on Chrysalis, March of the
Yep.
Saint.
They were the opening act.
Yeah, and I had also seen basically the same bill on February 21st of the same year, 85. And it was only a few weeks later, I believe. So
Yeah, my ticket stub says February at the Cameo Theater. I don't remember the dates, but
okay. It was right. It must have been. It was either right before or right after that, because I do know they were in Austin with Armored Saint. Wasp was that supposed the headliner or the middle band,
Yeah.
and they canceled.
Right.
And then Presence from San Antonio ended up on another episode of Talk Louder. We've actually talked about James calling my mom's house.
Yeah. Yeah.
That whole thing. So
Yeah.
you guys need to find that sort of like Easter egg in one of our episodes where I'm talking about that infamous phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw them late February, Armored Saint and Metallica at the Austin Opera House.
Yeah.
So double check your ticket stub. Anyway, so um, already becoming a big band prior to Metallica opening for Ozzy Osbourne. You know, they're already in theaters at this point. By '85, they're putting together Master, and it was like a ticking time bomb, right? When you kind of think about they're too big for the Cameo. Well, the Cameo holds about comfortably like 500 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to think that a lot of, you know, I bet people went to that show. If they could get tickets for all 3 nights, they did. So there was repeat offenders.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there was probably also some people just trying to hang out,
Right.
out front who saw them the first night, yada yada. That was such a great time for heavy metal. And in San Antonio, I remember it was like I wanted to live in San Antonio back then.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was I practically did. But you know, I think that all of these bands became huge in San Antonio as well as other markets in the United States.
Yeah. But San Antonio was definitely an early stronghold for all 4 of those bands.
Yes.
Most definitely. And that was an exciting gig for me because obviously we didn't know it at the time, but Cliff Burton was playing, and so I got to say that I saw Cliff, and you just felt like you were part of something special watching this new breed of extreme music and a packed house going crazy, and then knowing that the city demanded that they come back for 2 more nights, and it's like, yeah, dude, this is something, this is cool.
Let's go back to, just if you don't mind, creating the influence for all of these bands. We've talked about the new wave of British heavy metal, but we didn't talk, and we talked a little bit about Destruction and Sodom and bands like that were, Warfare. And then we talked about Motorhead, which is sort of an in-between because they were so loud and nasty because of Lemmy's disposition.
Yeah.
and how everyone fell in love with that. But there were also bands like Tank that were bluesy, Motorhead maybe sounding, but very kind of punk rock at the same time for whatever reason, arguably. But there's a key band that's also straddling the fence here without trying to sound polished or be a good musician or a good songwriter, but we're dabbling in anything and everything that could fit in what would influence, you could call an influence for all 4 of those bands. And that is the band Venom.
Venom. Yeah, I knew you were going there.
Yes,
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
The setup was obvious. They had all the cheeky satanic lyrics. They talked about extreme things that Black Sabbath may mention, but I think that Venom took it to the other place where they're talking about drinking the blood of virgins and in their own cartoony way. Well, in their own way, making it cartoony, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned that you could just hear the not so hot musicianship, which is what made that great. In my opinion, I feel like if Venom were these excellent musicians, it wouldn't have been so fun,
right,
and touchable.
That's the punk element creeping into it.
Exactly. So new wave of British heavy metal, which Venom are part of.
Yeah,
they are a huge part of that.
Yeah,
but you also got to remember that Raven is also this massive influence upon the Big Four because of how electric they are and thrashy they are without the same elements as Venom, without the same elements of bands that came just a couple years later with Destruction and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Other band Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, and that
Yeah.
extreme music. We're talking early black metal, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was a giant influence on the Big Four. They loved how roaring and like sort of just maddening this stuff sounded, which influenced the sound of these bands. Now, Anthrax had their own way and their own translation of that. Same with Megadeth. All these bands grew into their own skins very shortly after, with bigger deals and more money and more influence and more management. Whether
Yeah.
you start saying they were starting to become polished at that point, I wouldn't use that word. They're extreme. It's still extreme.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think that all of this becoming this huge phenomenon is not a surprise whatsoever. The Big Four concert in Bulgaria 11 years ago in June. It'll be 11 years ago in June. Sort of introduced the idea, the trophy that these guys have earned as being this cluster of something very, very special in American history, in music history, in thrash history, everything else. Very, very well earned. All of them are well-oiled machines. And other than with the recent retirement of Slayer, everybody's still alive and still going.
Yeah. And you're kind of leading me to somewhere I was going to go anyway. And I got to give credit to, I think Anthrax is doing some great work in recent years. I've been a big fan of their last couple albums. And I don't know if I can say the same about the other bands. Now, granted, I didn't give the Megadeth record Dystopia. I heard that was a really good record, and I
It's
still haven't
strong as
heard.
hell. Yeah,
That's
it's
what I've heard.
super
So
strong.
I gotta give them some props there. But I think Anthrax is doing some really cool stuff. I've been really impressed with their last couple albums. Um, and so they're aging well, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I've seen them a few times in recent years. They're still high energy, still, they're doing great things. I think I know some friends of mine that aren't necessarily crazy about some of their new albums, but I think they're pretty good.
Yeah, what are those titles?
One of them's called For All Kings, and the other
That's
one is
right.
called Worship Music.
That's right.
And
Okay.
they're solid in my opinion.
Yeah, they got great reviews. Honestly, I'm a little behind. I don't have those records, but I need to be fair to people listening. I'm a huge fan, but I'm just late on those, and I know we're talking years, years
Yeah,
of work I need to catch up on.
right.
Everyone who knows me trusts me that I'm in my own way. I'm keeping that music alive.
Yeah.
My kids at the School of Rock. I teach music for a corporate school called the School of Rock, and they had me do not one but two Big Four shows. So I was doing all
Wow.
music from all four bands in two different shows, and each show had completely different material. So I just did 30 songs. You know what I mean? A quarter of it
Yeah.
Megadeth, a quarter of it was Metallica, et cetera, et cetera. And I got Charlie Benanti to send the kids a good luck video.
Oh, nice.
And it was super nice of him to do. And
Very cool.
anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I think that it's important that to know that my bosses are helping me keep it alive just as much as I'm trying to soldier it as champion it myself, just as much as you.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to have this discussion today because I know you're so deeply rooted in the thrash metal scene and very passionate and knowledgeable about it, and you've got some firsthand history of you know playing shows with these guys and hanging out with them early in their careers, but when they were still driving around in a yellow Camaro or whatever.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Most recently, I want to plug that I got to be on a few tracks on David Ellefson's
Yeah.
no cover record.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super fun, and I think the production on it is just fucking huge sounding. So it's not a wimpy record. It was like, it's got the big money sound. The playing on it is outstanding, and I'm on a record with all of my heroes. I got to be on a song with Dave Lombardo. I mean, every song that I'm on has got Dave Ellefson on it. So I've got the big four right there.
Yeah.
But Charlie plays drums on a few songs. It's got everybody on it. It's got Al Jorgensen on it. It's got Dave McClain from San Antonio,
Yeah.
who's currently in Sacred Reich. He was in Sacred Reich before his 23-year stint with Machine Head.
Yeah.
Remember, they're a Bay Area band, so roundabout way you could say Dave McClain inadvertently is part of the Big Four historical. He's the corn in the vomit, it's a giant pool of, he's part of it.
He'll appreciate that.
trying to be vulgar without being, anyway. Yeah, he's part of the tapestry of that. And it's been great to be even just a fly, on the wall with that whole thing. I got to open for Anthrax. I got to open for Slayer. Never did Megadeth, but I'm on Ellefson's record. Saw Metallica countless times in their early days and was pen pals with James Hetfield. And, until they just became so huge that, I would have been considered a stalker to keep trying to write him. But, wrote back. I used to call him on the phone all the time. Anyway, that's a whole other story. I'm really glad that we did this show. Even just as how powerful of a history lesson it can really be to people who like metal.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to put you on the spot one time before we close out the segment and just ask you if you could only pick one album out of all the Big Four bands' catalogs, only one. Which album is your favorite out of the Big Four?
I can't do it. It's really it's really impossible. I mean, I could pick one record by each band.
Yeah, I knew you could do that. That's why I wanted to.
That's fairly easy.
That's easy. That's why I wanted to up the stakes and make
even though I think that in my brain and in my heart, the first three Metallica records are just one giant album.
Yeah.
That's not fair, I know, but it kind of is one giant record. I think between 83 and 86, that's such a short time. The older you get, time just is, days attach them, days turn to years like overnight. I mean, it sounds like a country song or something, but it's just a blur, man. And okay, yeah, it's early 83, boom, it's 86, and you already have 3 records out, and you're opening for Ozzy. Well, guess what's next? You never open for anyone else ever again.
Yeah. And only play the biggest stages the world can offer, too.
That's real. That's a real thing. So another American dream, not without tragedy, not without sacrifice. And you could say these things about all 4 of these bands.
Yeah.
You really can.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll pose the same question to myself. And I always kind of go back and forth. If I had to pick one album out of the Big Four, I'm probably partial to Master of Puppets. Although I will say that my son is his favorite album of all time right now. He's only 12, so he still has a long way to go. But his current favorite album is Ride the Lightning. So he's got me revisiting Ride the Lightning. And there are days when I could easily pick Ride the Lightning over Master of Puppets. But it's probably one of those 2 records. And again, I think it's only because I'm probably more invested in Metallica than the other 3 bands. because like you, I could pick a favorite easily from all four of them, and they're all going to be great records. But to me, it's probably Master of Puppets if I had to pick one. But that's impossible, right?
Well, it's still fair. You're looking inward, trying to figure it out when you are asked a question like that, and you struggle,
Yeah,
right? Because of where you were when you first heard it, the smells, the car
sure.
you were riding in, you know, maybe not quite what you had for dinner that day, but it is
Yeah,
like that. And your brain, your music part of your brain, how that you perceive that in your memories is why you are choosing that. Um, I have this weird sort of spin on the same idea about the Big Four and how much they changed rock and roll. All four of those bands just really changed the way. We've already covered that. What? I didn't know you could do that on drums. I didn't know
yeah,
you could play a guitar like that. Literally that, just over the top kind of thing, which
yeah,
is already proven a little bit by Merciful Fate and Venom and the early metal Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. But to take it to another level, like you mentioned as well,
yeah,
is huge. And your memory of that, I think that if you were already into hardcore or punk rock, and maybe you're a little younger than we are, and you hear Metallica, you're like, hey, this is cool. And then you heard Slayer. It's like you were waiting for Slayer. See
yeah,
what I'm saying? You were waiting for that to become bigger than or a peer of Metallica, but they were in the second breath. You hear about Metallica, then you hear about Slayer, and that's normal progress
right.
of just what was happening, all starting with kids trading cassette tapes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. This has been a good one. The Big Four. I knew we'd have a lot to share with each other on this subject, and I appreciate you giving us some insight of your firsthand stories and experiences with some of these bands. That's some really cool stories about you sharing stages and being friends with these guys before they were household names. So let's move on. And Jason, my shot of rock and roll for you this episode. Tell us, what is the first album you ever bought with your own money? This question gets asked all the time, and it's kind of a I don't want to say it's a lame question, but the answers are always interesting. So that's why I'm going to ask it. I know it's not a very clever question, but I always enjoy hearing the story of the first album anyone ever bought with their own money.
I don't want to disappoint you, but I feel like I'm going to, because the first record I bought with my own money, I don't really recall, because I feel like I was getting records for birthday, for Christmas, and randomly buying them in between with lunch money I saved or allowance or whatever. If I even got an allowance, I don't even remember if I did or not. Surely, every once in a while I would clean my room and get 50 cents.
Yeah.
The it's going to be a fight between what I remember, if that's fair.
Yeah, sure.
But it could be a fight between Queen, Kiss, and Elton John as far
Wow.
as what would have been my first record.
Yeah.
I think that I bought with my own money, to be clear to the question.
Right, right.
Maybe Hotter Than Hell, maybe Kiss Hotter Than Hell, I bought with my own money.
Nice.
I could have begged mom for it, you know. I was standing in a store holding Hotter Than Hell with, in tears. Oh my God, maybe I don't have a memory of that, but uh,
Yeah.
you know, that's how I felt about anything that was, considered to be over the top rock and roll. And I
Yeah.
considered Elton John and Queen to be over the top because I feel like they had a thing going on. It
Yeah,
was early. There was no Big Four yet. So,
yeah,
you have
yeah.
to think about rock and roll in its infancy. kind of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if it was hotter than hell, then I'd say that was a good investment for your first record. So awesome.
Yeah, and to be clear, once again, I had many records already stacked before I
Yeah.
had probably the
Yeah.
first record I used my own money to purchase.
Yeah.
I had older brothers who had awesome record collections that I would, you know, kind of sneak around and check their records out too. And they had great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Cool. Cool.
I got a shot of rock and roll for you. A lot of people may or may not know that you have started, dabbled in, you choose one of those words, Dave, a career somewhat on some kind of level in as a journalist, more profoundly about things you love, and your main love is rock and roll, heavy metal, and things like that, whether it be concert reviews or interviewing the bands that are coming to town for publications here in Central and South Texas. What in any form, and you can clear up some of that, how did you get here in as far as journalism goes, in a snippet of this answer to the question, out of all of the interviews that you've done, because I know you've done quite a lot of interviews with some of your favorite artists, and then people that were just pawned off to you by the publication that was either paying you or not paying you to do a piece for, and you probably just put your name in the hat to do it because you're a fan, and that's just as real as getting a good money gig on it. What was your favorite interview, whether it was suspecting that you prepared for or was last minute? Because you never know, you could have interviewed Barry Manilow and had the best time of your life.
I have not interviewed Barry Manilow, although I'm not opposed to it. It's just the opportunity has just never come up yet. So, to answer the first part of your question, I'm basically got into music journalism because I'm a frustrated musician, right? So, at one time, I used to read all the music magazines when I was a kid, and one day it occurred to me that somebody's getting paid to write these articles, and somebody's getting paid to interview these bands. And I'm a pretty good writer. At least that's what my teachers told me all through, middle school and high school and that sort of thing.
Sounds like somebody's getting someone's getting paid to play that guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's what you're talking about. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I still remember the magazine I was looking at. It was sort of one of these short-lived magazines. It was called Metal Shop, and there was a picture of Steven Tyler on the cover. And I still have that same issue. And I would say that was probably the turning point. That's what inspired me to pursue music journalism, which I've done, now for, oh my God, 25 years or something like that. But to answer your question, it's absolutely impossible, because some of the interviews I've done are my favorites for different reasons. So there's a category of people who are great interviews just because they're great talkers. Like Bret Michaels from Poison is a great interview because he's his own hype guy, right? And he's excited and he's friendly and he's supercharged and he's a great talker and storyteller. And then there's guys that
he needs a podcast.
Yeah.
He needs a podcast so he can release all those demons.
Yeah, we should.
Let's just hire him to do one with us, and
we should do that.
We'll just hand him the mic and let him talk the whole hour.
And he will.
I know. Yeah, that'd be fun.
So he's a great interview. I mean, there's people that are great interviews because they're great talkers. And then there's people that were great interviews because I just respect their stature in the world of rock and roll. And that would be, the Ozzy Osbournes and the Ronnie James Dios and the Neil Pearts and the Metallicas and the Van Halens. And then there's people that are great interviews because they were personal favorites of mine, as, like Kiss and the Ramones and things like that. And then there's guys like, I always remember Rob Halford and Jeff Tate as being really gracious. I think there was a couple interviews with each of those guys where I knew the conversation was going long, and I was trying to wrap it up and apologize to them for taking, stretching my time limit. And on both occasions, I remember both of those guys saying, take your time, man. We've got all day. I'll stay with you as long as you need. And I always thought that was really cool coming from someone of that stature who's probably in a hotel room waiting to go to dinner and I'm bothering him, right? So, things like that. But, as far as if I had to pick a great interview based on just the quotability of the person, which is ultimately what leads to a great story and a great interview, right? Is good nuggets coming out of this person. And I have to go with Lemmy. And I don't think that's going to surprise you of all people, but he's just so quotable, and the beauty of it is he's not trying to candy coat or sugar coat anything. He doesn't have an agenda, I guess is the best way to say it. Like if you interview a guy like Paul Stanley, he's a great talker and he's happy to talk to you and everything, but there's always this angle of pushing the new album and pushing the greatness of Kiss and pushing how enormous the stage show is this year, so you need to come back to this tour even though you've seen the last 15. There's always this agenda to promote.
Kiss and sell. Yeah. Sell.
Yeah. And Lemmy was never about that. Lemmy was just, if you didn't remind him, he'd forget that he's promoting an album,
Right. Well, he's also, and I recall this, he's always humbly telling you how god awful his band is.
Yeah.
He's always joking about, same awful band you're going to see tomorrow night, come hang out with us,
Well, he's the guy that came up with the immortal quote, if Motorhead moved in next door to you, your lawn would die.
Yeah.
So
right. Well,
so
that's what he means. That's what he means when he's selling you the band. He's like where we're going to take out the garbage to your house.
Yeah.
I'm going to come over and bring my garbage.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
So different people for different reasons, it's really impossible to pick a favorite interview. They all have their things about them that I found interesting or unique or funny. Lemmy, of course, is very funny too. So if I had to pick one just on sheer quotability and the quality of the conversation and the humor and the self-deprecating humor, no less, Lemmy definitely stands out.
I want to get in here. Our producer Jared and I helped you sort of digitize old cassette tapes of these interviews that you've collected over the years, where you at one point had no recording gear to some kind of recording gear, because some of them you just can't really hear what's going on. Your interview with David Bowie might be my favorite interview, but I can't hear him because of your recording quality. I will say this, that just right now, my favorite interview and the funniest interview I heard that I helped you sort of like upgrade and preserve was your David Lee Roth video. I mean, not video, but your David Lee Roth interview.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. You're like running out of time. And or you even say something to him like, graciously, you're like, Dave, hey, man, thanks. I think that we're almost running out of time. And he interrupts you and he goes, all right, man. Well, I tell you what, let me just give you some answers and you can insert the questions later. No, that wasn't me. No, I've never met her.
Yes, Your Honor, I was here last week.
and then that was it.
Yeah, that interview is pure comedy, and I've shared that tape with a few people, and they end up on the floor just rolling because I could sell it as a comedy album. It's really fun.
Yeah. And you can't make it up. You can't make that up.
Yeah,
it's right off the cuff. I mean, so
Well, that was a funny story because he called. We had our time zones mixed up, and Kim, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was staying at my apartment. She drove in from Houston and was napping on my couch in my apartment while I was at work. And the phone rings and she lets it go to the answering machine because it's not her house and she's taking a nap, right? And this voice comes on and it's David Lee Roth and he's cackling on the phone. He's like, Dave, it's Dave. Where are you, buddy?
He said, Dave Lee.
Yeah, he said it's
Dave,
David
it's
Lee.
Dave Lee.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
maybe David Lee. He didn't say
yeah,
Roth. He would just say David Lee.
yeah. So then Kim calls me in a panic at work, and she's like, "Oh my God, David Lee Roth just called."
Of course she did.
Yeah.
Why
And
I would have done that.
and I'm like,
If I was
"What?" He's
napping
like,
at your apartment, I would have done the same thing.
I'm like, "Wait a minute. He's not supposed to call for another 4 hours. What did he say?" And she's like, "He left a message on your machine." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's awesome. But what happened to my interview, you know?"
Right. Because
So I
I'm
had to
still
call
at work right now.
Yeah. So I called his publicist, and we got it back on track, and he and I had a laugh about that too. And that's when he said, I was just gonna leave you some answers and have you make up the questions."
Right. So I'm glad that in the ultimate interview that he actually pulled that one back out of the bag, because he
Yeah.
actually said that at the end of the interview too. Yeah, good stuff. What an honor that that you've been able to talk to your some really, really incredible musicians and songwriters that you are a huge fan of, that the world is a fan of, and they talk to you like you were a person, and back and forth. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to get you riled up about that for a moment, because
Nah.
it's pretty freaking cool, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate every cassette tape that I have, however degraded it might be. But you've seen them. I've got them in a box, and they've got the names of whoever I interviewed, and at this point, there's quite a pile of them, and they all bring back memories, and it's a lot of fun, especially now that I've got a kid who's growing up, and he just thinks it's amazing that David Lee Roth called my house, or
Yeah.
Gene Simmons called my house, or something
Or
like that.
Eddie Van Halen. I mean, you've got some
Yeah.
of those interviews. Those people have recently passed, so it
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
it more cherished for that strange and oddly timed reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, man, it was great talking to you today. I enjoyed the Big Four conversation. That was fun. And
This episode made me smile real big. Thank you.
yeah, I knew
Awesome.
it would. I
Yeah.
knew it would. They don't call you McMaster Blaster for nothing, you know.
Hey.
Or at least that's what I call you.
Mm-hmm.
So, on behalf of McMaster Blaster and myself, it's Metal Dave signing off on another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Thanks for listening.